Man, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure, and I I find it fascinating. Right, a lot of a lot of what happens in life is just serendipity, right? And I think most people won't know this, but I went to your podcast, and I don't think you released the episode yet.
I did not.
And yeah, I went to your podcast, and then I mentioned at the end of it. We had the whole podcast. I mentioned at the end of it that I was planning to have my podcast, and I was really like you said, you should invite me, and I was like, I don't know, because we had a tech conversation, and like I always avoid not to be too much on your face, bringing up this thing about religion and etc. And the fear for me really is like being too much on your face, and then I say, it's not going to be about technology, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And then I told you what it was going to be about, and I found out like just all those amazing things about you. So tell me more about yourself, like not your tech stuff. Today we don't care about your tech stuff. Tell me more about yourself.
Okay. Where do I? I guess I'll start at the beginning. So and and again, there's a lot of all of this is on YouTube. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who has like at least searched for me on YouTube or something. But I was born in India with a very very fatal illness. I
Okay.
still have it. It's the kind of thing where it's exceedingly easy for me to die. And so the gist of it is I'd never stop bleeding internally, externally. And the thing that most people get tripped up on is okay, so that just means you can never get cut. But it's
Hmm.
not so much about external bleeding. It's as human beings, Glauber, you,
Yeah,
me, we all bleed all the time. Like if you've
I
ever
know.
like taken a walk or gone upstairs, waved really aggressively, hugged someone too tight, somebody punched you on the shoulder because you told a joke. All of this leads to small scale internal bleeding. But for me, there is no small scale. It just never stops. Even the smallest internal bleed never stops, and it just grows and grows until a bunch of blood pools in some type of cavity, like a joint cavity or something. And from there, I just continue to bleed and also have blood sort of pool in unhealthy places. And sooner or later, it starts to become highly problematic, becomes a medical emergency, and then I die. Right. So I was born with this. Before I was born with this, my the doctors offered my mom an abortion. They were like, "Listen, this kid is not gonna
Hmm.
make it easy on you."
Yes.
And so there's an easy path out. How would you like to do this? And she was like, "Absolutely not. Are you kidding me?" And so, to my regret, sometimes I was born, um, and uh, it was not easy. I mean, like the there is treatment for this, but the healthcare
Hmm.
is expensive everywhere. It's a standardized price by big pharma, and the price is one. And this is the last I checked anyway. The price is $1 per unit of medicine, and
Hmm.
the appropriate dose is 40 to 50 units per kilogram of medication. So I'm 70 kilograms. That's roughly 3,500 units, so $3,500 per injection. And to have any chance at a good quality of life, it must be administered preventatively or prophylactically in the medical community, you'd say. And so that's $3,500 preventatively every. It used to be, so earlier in my life, it was every other day. So that's
Oh
three.
man,
Yeah, so that's
that's.
that's
I
assuming.
was wondering, is it weekly? Just you're
Yeah,
saying
so
it's every other
assuming
day.
three times
Yeah.
a week, that's 9,500 a week, roughly $10,000, and over half a million a year, right? And so, like, I was born in India. There's no way you can afford this.
Hmm.
You just die, or you end up paralyzed or crippled in some way, shape, or form. And so, without saying too much, I realize I'm going long here, but
We
at
have we
some
have
point,
time. We book long form exactly for this.
good,
Like there's no
good, yeah.
rush.
And so given that cost of medicine, and we can talk, I mean, it's called the save file, so I'm happy to talk faith and stuff
Yeah.
here, but I somehow, I don't know if you or your audience believe in miracles. This is very like woo woo, like hippie stuff to some,
Hmm.
but by some miracle, when I was a baby, my father, who was not an educated man, no degree, I don't think he finished high school, ended up getting a job in Qatar, the country that hosted the FIFA World Cup in 2020,
Hmm.
2022 and 2022, right? And he moved there with me. and we found out that this $500,000 a year preventative treatment was not free preventatively, but it was free in case of a medical emergency. So in the case like I'm actually at risk of death, they will save me. And so this was huge.
And
And so what they
your father did not know this about Qatar. It was just
No, no,
something that he
nobody knew
found
it.
out
It
after. Yeah.
just so happened. Yeah. And the reason for that is also very cool. It's almost like biblical, because what happened was the ruler of Qatar had a really bad kidney problem and he needed a transplant. And this is some Qatar lore. Like, this is not in the media.
Yeah.
And nobody was willing to donate their kidney to him, except some like Afghan refugee living on the street. He was like, "I have nothing to live for. I'm going to give you my kidney." And that's when the king sort of decreed, like, okay, emergency care is just free for everybody. Absolutely wild. And so, what ensued for the next nearly 20 years was, I would just have a life normal. I would go to school. I would do the regular things, but at some point, about a week or every 2 weeks, I would start bleeding. I would sense internally that I'm bleeding. I would
Hmm.
lose a lot of blood. I would go pale. I would faint. All of that, but I can't do anything about it yet because it's not an emergency. So I would have
Emergency.
to wait
Yes.
until I'm near death, and
Oh
then
man.
go to the
Oh.
hospital, and have them save my life for free. And there's a recovery period, and then I would, go back to school, and it's just a cycle of, okay, I'm healthy, I'm near death, I'm healthy, I'm near death, and this would continue for the next nearly 20 years. And then finally, and I'll finish with this, finally, the law in Qatar is it's a patriarchal society, and your listeners can choose how they feel about that. I'm feminist, and I agree, for equal opportunity, but the world is not as clean as we want it to be, right? And so, patriarchal society, the law is that, and this is there's a reason for this. So in the population of Qatar, only 10% of all inhabitants are locals, are citizens, are born Qatari. And so they want to protect their like national identity, their race. And so, given that they're outnumbered 9-1 by expats, they don't allow people to retire there. And so, the law is when you turn 60, you take your family and go back to your country
And
of origin,
you live. Yeah.
if you're an expat. And so, when my dad was 58, I could literally see, okay, in 2 years, I'm going to die. I'm going to go to India and I'm going to die.
Yeah.
I knew how to code. And so I looked for jobs in countries with better prospects
How
in
old?
healthcare.
How old were you? How old were you at that time? Because you
I
said your dad was
was
58. Just to,
I was my dad had me when he was 35. So when he was 60, I
okay.
would have been, I don't know,
Yeah.
like 20, I don't I 22,
An
23.
adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. An
Yeah, I
adult.
was an
A
adult.
young
So
adult.
22,
Yeah.
23.
Yeah.
And I knew how to code. So I found a job in Amsterdam, booking.com, but I was rejected because I didn't know enough about A/B testing. And so then finally I found a young startup in Berlin that was like, yeah, you have the front end skills we need. And so they got me a work visa and all of this. And then I moved to Berlin. And the first thing I did, literally within my first 24 hours, I went to the hematology hospital and I said, hey, listen, you don't know me. I just got here. I'm literally off the plane, but like I need this healthcare. Can you sort me out? And after the doctor sort of got over the surprise, that they very quickly put me on a great prophylactic care system, and that's what I've been living on since. So
It's still that expensive, or is it the conditions in Germany are better for that? Just
yeah,
to.
so Germany has social healthcare. Some All the residents pay for it,
Hmm.
and you know how it works, right? They all pool money together, and it all
Yeah. Yeah.
comes to me. But they in the middle of COVID, so in 2021, they asked me. They said, "Hey, there's a new experimental clotting agent. Um, would you like to try it?" And the enhancement is, instead of having to take it every other day, it lasts longer. So it lasts a
Yeah.
week. And for me, this is absolutely life changing. And so I said, yeah, let's try it. And so I took it, and it exceeded everyone's expectations. It's sort of a miracle drug. And now, so I take it once a week. I take 4,000 units once a week. So that's $4,000 per week, times 52. That's about 200K. Um, so it's half the cost, which is really cool.
Hmm.
But I think the bigger medical marvel miracle is that the doctor, you should have seen the look on the doctor's face when she told me this. She was like glowing, right? She said, a world first has happened. What they've done is they were able to now, with this new drug, give someone of advanced age with my disease, their hip was sort of damaged. They were able to do a full hip replacement surgery, which you cut someone open with my disease, they die.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
absolutely, yeah.
but they can do that now, and so the quality of life is just going off the charts for everybody, even the people of advanced age, and it's just such a cool time to be
Yeah.
alive. So yeah, that's the broad spectrum of where I come from outside of
No,
tech.
you ask me if I believe in miracles and if my audience believes in miracle. Now I don't know my audience. I don't even know if I have an audience. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. We'll find out. We'll find out soon enough. But like one thing I told, I was chatting the other day, and I put this on Twitter, and we're chatting about that. Like I was an atheist for 20 years, around 20 years. So I didn't believe in any of that. And in fact, I had very low opinion of people who did. Which is part of the reason I wanted to start the podcast. Because, but at some point, I told this person with whom I was having an argument, I believe in one miracle. So I don't believe in miracles. I don't believe they happen, but I believe in that one of them did happen. I've been and it's funny because those things like they feel a little bit like a house of cards.
Yeah.
I don't see the word like that anymore, but as recently as a year ago, I had this stance. Like I believe one miracle happened, but none other. It's all. But just hearing your story, it's such a
What is that one miracle?
that Jesus Christ rose from the dead.
uh,
When
yeah.
when people ask me why do you consider yourself I'm Catholic but Christian in general, my answer is usually because based on my experience, people who die tend to stay dead. And and I became convinced through reading and researching that like this one time things worked out in a different way, right? But then it's not just it's funny because you have to go into the definition. What is a miracle, right? Nothing about natural law was broken in the story that you tell me.
Yeah.
Nothing, right? But just it's not like somebody cured you, and maybe those things do happen, but I'm not saying that they don't happen. But it's such a fantastical group of coincidences, right? That at some point you got to ask yourself. I mean, okay, is this really just random?
Yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah,
like your definition of what is a miracle. It has to
yeah,
break the natural law. And by
yeah.
natural law, it's just sort of the law that we've established
Mhm.
based on our observation.
Yeah. So in that definition, what happened to you is not a miracle, but in I think in a liberal use of the word, it can be seen as that.
However,
Uh,
I will
yeah.
challenge that a little bit because
Okay. Let's go for
in
it.
in the early 1990s, um,
Hmm.
for a person with no high school qualifications to get a job halfway across the world, um, that does defy the natural law that we had back in before the internet, before
Well,
remote work,
mhm.
before not only that, but then for the for a country to say emergency healthcare is free for everyone. I don't know, that may not have been the
Yeah,
case, but these coincidences, which I think are so cool,
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it may be a violation of natural law to get a foreign job in those days. But again, I was like
Well,
a child back
it's
then.
just when people are talking, like especially from this background, like what I would have, you know, certainly would have told you a while back is we talk about scientific and physical natural laws, right? So this
Right.
person getting a job doesn't mean like the gravity started working differently. Like it's very, you have to admit that it's in a very different category of like this person died
Yeah.
and three days later was not that anymore. I mean, it's not the same class of miracle.
Yeah.
But I have no problem with the use of the word because a lot of that is just this. Like people, another word that comes up a lot when you're discussing those things is proof. Do you have proof that this happened? Right?
Yeah.
But look, what you call proof on your daily life is different than what a mathematician would call proof when doing a mathematical proof. And then like what is proof for a uh, physicist is different than what is proof for a historian. Right. So
Yeah.
it all depends on those layering things. So like, can you call what happened to you a miracle? I think I'm fine with that. I mean, just in the
Yeah.
sense that like so many things so many things that to come together
Yes.
in a sense that you wouldn't expect, that even if gravity didn't work in a different way, even if like this thing was not removed miraculously from you, look, I'm cool with that. Is this why you're a Christian?
That's a good question. Who said
Yeah.
I'm a Christian?
Well,
I
you
love.
said you're a Christian. Well,
Did I?
you also said that you had problems with the name and etc. But you are. I believe you're a Christian. You believe in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I'd love to go down this
Yeah.
path, but
Let.
I think it's worth talking about. I think it's
Yeah.
worth setting a pretty broad stage here because I
Yeah.
have a huge, enormous problem with the use of the term Christian.
Okay.
Um, I
Let's. It's your show, man. Let's.
I was having a discussion with
Okay.
somebody, one of the church leaders earlier in the week, and he was telling me his sister is unmarried and she wants to marry a Christian, and I was like, that is so dangerous, a sentiment, and it's
Mm-hmm.
dangerous because it's a term that anybody can claim. In fact, it's a term that
Mm-hmm.
most people claim, and we just sort of
True.
take it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's wild, like and you hear the stories, right? You hear the stories about like people in churches saying, oh yeah, I'm totally a Christian, so like let me do like children's ministry, and then they end up molesting all the children. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's so dangerous. So I do not just take this term Christian lightly, and I think honestly all of us would be better off if we didn't, because
Mm-hmm.
the term now is conflated with a bunch of nonsense that, if you ask me, has nothing to do with Christ. So, for example, Christian means you're anti-abortion, and not so much anti-abortion, but also like anti-freedom to some people, and it means you have views against marginalized communities like the LGBTQ plus community. Like, there's all kinds of conflations of evil with the term Christian. So I do not identify as a Christian in the way that culture understands this term, and I think we
Mm-hmm.
need to establish that on your podcast, but just in mass media. And so, okay, with that, I'd love to, if I'm able, talk about this in with some preparation. And the preparation is,
Yeah.
um, what. Let's start by talking about the things I hate, and I think this is very important to establish precedent. So, with your permission, of course, it's your show. I just want to.
No, you're my guest. I
Okay.
want you to feel yourself at home. In fact, this is one of the things. Like, I want to write it down somewhere. And first of all, I don't agree with anything you said right now, but just I would love us to have the space where you can show the world that you can have those discussions in a
Yes.
civil manner. And like, yes, and it's funny because like we were going to be talking about things that are deeply important
Yes.
for all of us, right?
Yes.
And if there's one goal I have with this podcast is this: like, can we have those discussions, like disagreeing with things that become a part of who you are at the core, and just talk about them.
Yeah.
So look, there's no off limits. There nothing here is off limits.
Good, and we can
It's
do them ideally in a way that respects and
yeah,
honors each other. Because like
absolutely.
the
Yeah,
art of like, I disagree with you, but I'm going to honor you,
yeah.
is just doesn't exist, right? So, um, okay, so I absolutely dislike the misrepresentation of
Hmm.
Christianity, the corruption of the term in particularly Western American society. But unfortunately, they have the loudest voice in the media, and so
Hmm.
that then trickles all the way through to Europe and India, and everybody thinks what America says is true, for the most part. And so I struggle with this. If we look at the term Christian, it means little Christ. Okay, so then who is Christ? He's a guy who was vehemently iconoclastic. I love this word iconoclast. It means you don't like the sort of religious figures of the day.
Hmm.
Jesus Christ, historically, the accurate picture is he was one of the most anti-religious people, period. In fact, he would find widows, orphans. If we sort of extrapolate through time and space, if he was today, he would be the one advocating for diversity, inclusion. Hey, love your neighbor as yourself. This was his
Yeah.
idea. It was if you're without sin, you cast the first stone and people leave. It was I'm going to love and give my life for gay people, trans people, cis white people, whatever. I love, that's it. This is the person, right? And so to be Christian means to embody those values to me. And again,
Hmm.
I used to be a pastor. We can talk about all of this. And so if you come to the modern church, the American church, what you have is what you have. And I'll reserve commenting on that. I think people have their own ideas of what they see in the media. I think this is very far from Christian. And so, okay,
Have you just a parenthesis here? Have you lived in America?
I haven't lived there. I
Yeah,
can't because of the healthcare system.
right. Yeah,
But I unfortunately spent
yeah.
more time there than I want to.
Yeah,
Um,
because I did not know, for example, about your background. I knew you lived in Germany,
yes,
so I'm just trying to place together. That has nothing to do, of course. Like it doesn't mean that your opinion
sure.
is one way or another influence here and there, but just I'm trying to picture together like your
Yeah.
life story, right?
Yeah, we can also
Yeah.
like look at Germany, right? Germany was a
Mhm.
very Protestant Christianity began here in a town called Wittenberg. I went
Yeah.
to the church and I saw the
Hmm.
place where Martin Luther like wrote his 99 theses.
Hmm.
Still, Germany doesn't. I feel like when they think, and I don't feel like I was a pastor. I From talking to people, Christianity to them means I'm going to go to church because it's cultural, and I'm going to stand up when they say, and I'm going to sit down when they say, and the guy is going to maybe talk like this, and that's it, right? So it's more culture than faith, and
Hmm. I
it's
fully
more
agree with that. Yeah.
it's more talk than action. Okay, so coming back to the question, am I a Christian?
Yeah.
I hate religion. I hate Christianity in the way that culture represents it.
Hmm.
Um, I do not identify as a Christian in that term. However, if we consider the term Christian to mean one who looks up to the person and work of Jesus Christ, like you look at him and you go like, that guy is a hero. He's a hero because he loved widows and orphans. He advocated love your neighbor as yourself. He gave his life for humanity. I think there's no dispute that he died. I think there's a lot of dispute that he rose from
Yeah.
death, which we can talk about. But one way or another, I think every religion and every human being who has thought about the matter will agree that he was killed at the hands of the Romans, and some would say he gave his life for his people, mainly because there is no historical evidence at all of him, sinning, to use the theological term, right? So you have this person who has always been for justice and liberty and freedom, who showed up and said, "I'm going to love the poor. I'm going to equally give myself to everybody," and was killed for it. And he was killed for it because, according to the Jews of the time, he claimed to be God. That's it. That's the big criminal. So he never actually did anything bad. And he was, and so I look at that and I go like, wow, this guy stuck to his guns. He loved people in the process, and he challenged. He literally went to a bunch of religious people and was like, "You guys are a bunch of snakes." And in the modern day, he would use probably, "You guys are a bunch of gas bags or bigots, or you're all a piece of
Yeah.
shit." Like he would say something like that. And we can talk about the motivations for that. All that to say, yes, in this context, I would identify as a Christian. I look up to Jesus Christ. I think he's a hero.
Yeah.
I want to be like him, and I think and we can talk about this more if you want. I think he is God incarnate. Um,
That's where I was getting to, because there are a variety of paths that you can take, right? So
sure.
you look at this figure, and you say, "Wow!" And a lot of people do that, by the way. I've met a lot of people in the past that would say things I don't remember, to be honest, if I have a phase in which I would claim that, but in our industry, you do hear people saying this, like, "Yes, it's a great guy." Lots of teachings, lots of things that we should apply to our lives, and um, in a way that almost sounds obvious. But I was always careful with that when people say, "Hey, all stuff that Jesus says is just like the obvious, like love your," but it wasn't obvious back then, right? And it is only obvious now because the West has been going through like 2,000 years of Christianity in a sense. So influential figure changed the world, but I think the discussion like atheism and religion, because an atheist could look and say, "Yeah, great guy, great
yeah,
hero,"
yeah,
but I would consider you a religious person if you make the leap and say he was not just a great guy, he was not just a hero, he was the Son of God. You believe that?
yeah, for sure. I do still struggle with the term religious though, because
Yeah.
if you think about how it's used outside of topics of faith,
Hmm.
if you think about, like, for example, a gym person, somebody who goes works out, he
Hmm.
works out religiously.
Yeah.
This guy codes on the weekend.
Well,
Or this, and
but,
this
but look,
religious,
it just have you
yeah,
have you ever seen an act of vandalism?
yeah, sure.
And what is vandalism?
It's it's
Vandalism is to destroy something. But the
okay.
term comes from the Vandals, which was
Mm.
a group of people in a particular place in time. It's the thing that we're talking about proof. I think it's important to have context for what you're discussing. So if you're discussing something that happened on the street and people use the term vandalism, look, it's unfortunate that it is like this, but it's a term that became accepted.
Yeah.
But if you're discussing the history of the Roman Empire and then you said you have a Vandal invasion, you don't like, it's not the same thing. I mean, in that
Yeah.
context, that means something very, very precise. So I think for us here today, if we're talking like you believe in the supernatural in a sense, right? You believe in God, you believe in the existence of God. Uh, we're calling that religious,
Okay.
right? It's just non-religious if you don't. Just
Yeah, but I think we need Glauber. I think we need to really make
yeah.
this stuff explicit, because if we don't
Okay.
make
Yes,
that what you
absolutely.
did explicit, what's going to happen is people are going to come with their implicit biases and think religion
Absolutely.
equals
Yeah.
legalism, and that
And and
yeah,
and the I hate to disappoint you, but we're going to clarify as much as you want, and people still come with their biases.
it's true.
That's but we try our best. I mean, what choice do we have? We try our best. Just
Yeah, yeah. So in that sense, yes, I'm religious, but in the sense of he goes to the gym religiously, he does stuff even though he doesn't want to, but it's like required of him.
mhm.
I am
Yeah,
not
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. Is it about requirement, or like people when people say that they're talking about passion and like you do something really passionately, right? Because it's the thing that gives meaning to your life, going to the gym for people who go to the gym religiously, right?
That's a great distinction. Yeah,
Yeah,
if that's the case, passion, then yes, I'm
yeah,
I'm fairly passionate about the person and work of Jesus Christ. I think
yeah.
he's tremendous.
But you believe the event, the thing.
I believe the event. I
Yeah.
believe I could recite the whole Nicene Creed from memory. I believe all of that. Yeah,
Awesome.
God in the flesh, born to a virgin. How does that work? I don't know. I didn't make
I
the
don't know.
universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, born to a virgin, lived a perfect life, died an not just undeserved but ill-deserved death
Hmm.
on my behalf, on your behalf, on everyone's behalf. That through him we can sort of he paid the bill so that I can go free, and rose from death after 3 days, and all of it. I think, yeah, I think I approach it with a lot of skepticism. I think healthy
Hmm.
skepticism and critical thinking, but fundamentally, I do believe that. And there are questions that people come at me all the time with, like, can God make a rock so heavy that he can't lift it? These kinds of like traps. And I go like, I don't know.
I don't know.
I
Yeah.
don't care. It's called faith. And in some cases, you need blind faith. Faith sometimes is the like anti knowledge. It's the answer for things you just can't know. For example, if I like I'm sitting on a chair right now, so I can
Well,
very easily.
when you say anti-knowledge, obviously, because this is what we are accused of, and the stuff that I accused religious people in the past of is like, does that mean that you don't value knowledge, that you don't
Yeah.
value knowing, that you don't value discovering things about the world? And I hope that's not what you mean.
No,
Yeah,
no, no.
it's yeah.
It's more I have faith for the things that I cannot know. And okay, what does that mean? For example, I know that I can sit here because there's a chair under me. I know, so I don't need faith in the
Mhm.
chair because I know the chair exists. Right? There are things that I don't know that I need to lean on faith for because I don't know them.
Yeah.
And I think, like, dude, like gravity is a theory that we all have faith in. I think there's a big like sort of exclusion from science and faith, which I think is complete nonsense, because like you need a good amount of faith. I think it was Einstein who even said you need a good amount of faith to do science.
Oh, but
Because
gravity, I agree with you in principle, but the theory of gravity, for example, is different because you can test that thing a billion times and see for yourself what the results are. Now, here's the thing that I think people don't realize, and at some point I realized, but like I don't think it was very crucial for me, but just a realization that I had. You do have to assume that whatever happened in the past will keep happening in the future.
mm,
And if you think from complete blank slate, that is not obvious. Like it is something that you assume. You have those physical laws, and they work for the first 13 billion years of the
yeah,
universe. And who's to say? Now, obviously, I believe they will keep working, but that is a belief. There's nothing that you can do to prove that. I mean, to say, hey, look, without this assumption, without this belief, we can't do anything.
Yeah.
Fine, fair, or like, we'll take it. But philosophically, if you really put things like in epistemological terms and what do they mean, like you were assuming that they will keep working, which should be clear. I do too. but I do acknowledge that this is something that you can't prove.
Yeah.
It's a belief.
Yeah, exactly. And so belief, and I do you one better. There's a really really great lab in Stanford School of Medicine called the Belief Lab. Like it's led by Dr. Ali Crum. I think she published a book. She definitely published papers here where it's absolutely wild, right? Like people change their physiology, their internal like secretion of hormones based on what they believe. It was a great experiment with milkshakes. So they gave the same milkshake to two groups of people, but told them this is a diet milkshake and this is an indulgent milkshake. And based on what people believed about the identical milkshake, their physiology changed. They secreted different hormones. Their blood showed reproducibly every time different results. And so faith
Oh,
has a
there's a
role.
connection. There's a connection between mind and body that we don't fully understand, right?
Correct. Exactly. And so coming back to your question, is this why I'm a Christian? And now that we've established what Christian
Yeah.
means, it's partly. I mean, it's I I don't know. Like there's these memes. For example, what was it? They post a picture of like an American garage, which is a home gym, and they go like the European mind cannot comprehend this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
This is me with the
Yeah.
series of miracles that is my life. The Tejas mind cannot comprehend. I cannot comprehend
Mhm. Yeah.
how I can receive such grace and gifts outside of my, like I didn't do anything to have my father like move to Qatar. Like I
Mhm.
wasn't skilled. It just happened, right? And so if you look at the past 31 years of my life, Glauber, it's just been miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after, and it's sort of like if you read the Bible, you will see miracle after miracle. And I go like, look, there is no other way that my mind can comprehend this other than yielding to faith.
Mhm. And you were born in India.
That's right.
Where in India exactly? Because India has a couple of pockets that are Christian, like Goa. I've been to Goa once. It
Yeah.
was a crazy experience for me going to Goa in that sense. Because, but you where exactly were you born? Just
Yeah. Bangalore. Um,
Bangalore.
but I never lived more than
Yeah.
2 years there. So we moved as I was a baby, as I mentioned.
So Bangalore is, and I don't know if Dev is watching us. Dev was saying like all the things about his experiences with religion as well, and how he was raised in a super religious family, or I'm not sure if he was talking about just the family or the surroundings in
Yeah.
India, which I presume are not Christians, but for the most part. So you come from this background in which people are. I would again, I'm fully ignorant about India, but I'm going to assume, correct me if I'm wrong, that it will be Hindu for the most part in that area.
Yeah. For the most part, I think you're right. India is super diverse and divided, unfortunately. But my mother's line
Mhm.
is Anglo-Indian. So the history is a British
Okay,
colonizer got
right.
with some
So
Indian, and like that's where I come from, and that's also where my blood disease comes from, all the way back to Queen Victoria, from the early days when they were inbreeding. Um,
yeah,
yeah, I'm
that,
inbred.
that, man, that that is a subject for a whole other podcast. I mean, the European monarchies nothing beats the Habsburgs anyway. Just that those guys are unbeatable. But you moved to Qatar,
Hmm.
and which again, forgive my ignorance about Qatar, I would presume is a mostly Muslim country
Yeah,
with Islam all around you. Even
yeah,
if you say, because I was thinking about that, you said, well, 90% of the people are foreign born, so probably they bring with them whatever they already believed. But I would assume, like I've never been to Qatar, but I've been to Dubai, that the culture around you is reminding you of Islam the whole time, right?
yeah,
If you're not required to do that, they're not going to force it on you. It's a very liberal, especially for Middle Eastern standards place. But like, that's what you're seeing the whole time, and then you see this for a lot of times. So you believe in God because you see your life as a series of miracles. and you were born in a place where Hinduism is, let's say, the default choice,
Yeah.
and then you move to a place where Islam is what you see. What's the last piece of that puzzle? Like, so
Yeah.
you believe in God, but why Christ?
This is a great question. You're really good at this. I can't believe this is the first episode and it's like incredible. Really enjoying the discussion so far. Um, I so my mother, as I mentioned, she's Anglo-Indian, so she comes from a line of Christians. However, her family converted. I think they were Catholic at some point, like you,
Hmm.
and something went wrong, as you would say. Um, but they eventually became Protestant. And and so my mom was Protestant, but I think it's really interesting because there was no, before my generation there was a lot of this is the holy way because this is the holy way, don't ask questions, just do it.
Hmm.
And I think this is very interesting because I remember even for me, like questions being like, "Oh no, no, don't ask those. Just go with it. Just go. Sin is bad. Don't lie. That's it, right? Sin is bad." And there was also a lot of like the game Broken Telephone, where like you send a message.
Yes.
It was like that. So I was always an engineer. I've been writing code since I was 8 years
Hmm.
old. So like, why is it like that? Why is it bad to lie? How? Why would God punish me if I sin? Um, and I age and I go like, wait a second, God won't punish me because God punished him in my place. And so all of this made sense later. But okay, to
Hmm.
answer your question, like why Christianity? Because my mom um was, and she would make us pray. We were kids, we didn't want to, but like
Hmm.
before bed every night she'd make us like, you know like cross our hands and go like, dear God, please bless him and bless her and all of this. I was raised, I think, like most religious people, to believe that God is a magic vending machine that will give you what you ask for.
Hmm.
You just have to ask. We can talk about how that's a fallacy, at least to me. But so anyway, that's where it came from, and it got to a point where every literally Glauber every single night, we would pray, God, please heal Tejas from his hemophilia, from his disease, every night. And we prayed it when I was sick and nearly dying. We prayed it when I was healthy. It was just constant. And at some point, I lived long enough to go, God, what the hell, man? How much are you like dense? Like how long? How many times do I need to keep asking
Yeah.
you? Um, or do you just not want to, or do you just hate me? Is that it? Like you brought me into this world so I could be miserable. You brought me into
Yeah.
this world so I could be in a hospital alone. Look, you get to a certain age, they don't even let your parents stay with you in a hospital anymore, right? So
Hmm.
do I just spend time alone here, half dead, wishing I was fully dead? Is that the life you wanted for me? And so what my mom started at some point ended up turning into a hatred. So kind of like you were an atheist. I was not an
Hmm.
atheist. I was just like, God is a piece of shit. He clearly is just a big bully. I don't need this shit. He's fucking my life up. Okay. And to the point where school kids, friends of mine, um some of them were Christian, and I was like, oh, you believe that Corinthians shit? And they were like, don't call it shit. And they were like defending their faith.
Yeah.
um but yeah, no, I was angry, man. I was angry because my life was horrible and I wanted to die. And the only thing stopping me was I was alone in a hospital. Um, and I had no one to turn to. There was no one. There were doctors who treated me like just another job, and my parents were not allowed to come anymore. And I was just half dead in a hospital every other week or every week, just going, what the, like, who do I talk to? I
I
am
had a
so,
I had a very difficult upbringing as well.
yeah,
Not nearly. I mean, I'm ashamed to say that now after hearing your story. Like, not nearly as bad as you. Like, my things were different and were more psychological in nature. Um, but I think we a lot is said about, especially in the Catholic faith, there is this idea of redemptive suffering,
yeah,
because you, like Christ, can also suffer
yeah,
for others, and you offer your suffering. So I think a person who follows Christ should not be afraid of suffering.
yeah,
That there is something that is said a lot today. The idea of vending machine, like, I hate that. This idea, like, God is this thing that just gives me what I want.
yeah,
That's not what you see in the Bible, right? What you
yeah,
see in the Bible is like all of them were ready to die, and not just die, but suffer.
yeah.
But
I, I
kids are the problem. And like what is hard for me to square in my mind is this: like, how do you ask this of a kid,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
right?
I was asked
Yeah,
this, like
yeah,
this was asked me, and so I was alone. And I, as much as I hated God and wanted nothing to do with him, dude, like when you're, like solitary confinement in prison, it was like
yeah.
that. Really, there was no one around, and so at some point I started to go insane, and I was like, okay, God, I don't believe in you. In fact, I hate you, but like there's no one else I can talk to. So
They
uh
thought,
what's that? Yeah, I would just talk to this God I didn't believe in, right? um and so that's, and again, all of this, Glauber, I believe now, obviously, as I've been a pastor and all of
yeah,
this, like it's, I believe in suffering. I believe it's divine and there's a role. But this was, I was a kid. And so
yeah, totally, totally.
from there, at some point, and I'm happy to talk about how I ended up finding um actual Christ, like actual
Hmm.
truth, at least what I believe to be truth, on my own. And this is where, people talk about your come to Jesus moment. This is like I made it my own, um, after many of those sort of accidental conversations.
Hmm. But the thing that I'm interested in exploring is that we hear a lot from atheists, and every time I say you hear this a lot from atheists, those are things I used to say, right? So like I'm just trying to be a little bit more like a. But you hear a lot from atheists that like it's just cultural, So the only reason you believe Jesus is because you were raised in,
Yeah.
you were not raised in a country like that, like most people are in America or Canada or whatever. Uh, you were raised in a family that had that, and I can guarantee you, like I had the discussion with a friend of mine the other day, and most of the time when I'm saying I had a discussion with a friend of mine the other day, is always the same friend because I don't talk about this with a lot of non-believers.
Oh, we're fixing that
Uh,
with your podcast, maybe.
yeah, well, absolutely, but I say I can prove to you and I can guarantee to you that becoming Catholic for me was not a cultural thing because I really tried hard not to. Like
Mm,
once I accepted that Jesus died and came back, uh, for me it was something like, okay, then what do I do? This has consequences, right? You can't just believe that. You can't just come to the conclusion that this happened, and then keep living your life. I mean,
yeah.
you have to at least examine everything you're doing. So I had this period of in which like, okay, so what do I do with that? And my first instinct was to go look for a Protestant church, right? And then which of them? And then I spent a lot of time trying to figure out like this and that. And I would talk to my wife about it and would say, hey, look, I'm convinced this is real. I'm having trouble figuring out what to do with that because like I can't just keep living my life the same way as before. The only thing I don't want to do is become Catholic because that's terrible. I just that my impression, like it was. So I really, really, really try to resist it. So for me, I don't think it's a cultural thing, but like I want to explore this with you because you
Yeah.
had access to all of those things. I mean, you could have figured out that this God that you're talking about is the God of Islam or the God of one of the Hindu gods, and yet you came to Christ. So how is
Yeah.
that for you?
Yeah, I can share with you why. And to be fair,
Yeah.
I know Islam reasonably well because I grew up in Qatar. I
Hmm.
actually have a Quran somewhere here.
Hmm.
Allahu Akbar, whatever you want. Um, I also am familiar. So my best friend in the whole world is Hindu. I think
Hmm.
my father's family is all Hindu, and so I have a reasonable exposure. A lot of my friends are Israeli, so Jewish.
Yeah.
I've been exposed to a lot of this, and so the for me and also to speak about Buddhism as well, like pantheism, or this idea that
Hmm.
God is in everything, right? Or is it everything is sacred, and panentheism, that God inhabits everything, from Buddhism. So I'm familiar with all of these, and part of my journey, especially in like pastoral experiences, like let's just study everything. If you want to talk about
Hmm.
the strengths and weaknesses and trade-offs with Terzo as a database, you want to talk about Planet Scale and Zeta and Astra.
Yeah.
So you sort of understand the landscape, right?
Hmm.
Um, for me, the key thing that made the Christian faith the most sensible, and this is not to say everything else is nonsensible. It's just it's highly personal, like my brain, right? Um, to me was most other faith-based systems that I've seen and studied were very like I was the variable.
Hmm.
I was the variable that had to either pray 5 times a day or do good deeds. And I know Catholicism has a school of works based salvation as well. But I
Well,
had it.
it's not works based,
Yes.
because
Okay.
like when you say works based, you have the idea that this is what you need to do to get saved,
Yeah.
as if grace played no part,
Yeah.
right? And Catholics will also accept grace,
Yeah.
same as Protestants. The
Yeah.
idea is it's all about the word alone,
Yeah. Exactly.
right?
Right. Right.
Sola
Exactly.
scriptura and sola fide, all of that, right? So there is no Catholic that would disagree on the importance of grace, and how that differentiates Christianity from the rest, right?
Right. And so that's what it was for me because like, as I mentioned, it's not about praying 5 times a day. It's not about doing good deeds. It's not there was this whole idea of karma, right? Where I grew
Hmm.
up, there was if you do
Yep.
a lot of good things, then it's going to come back to you. If you do a lot. And so what I noticed was this trend where all other belief systems that I examined where you either get what you deserve, um, or you don't get what you get punished, right? And
Hmm.
then I study Christianity in depth, and I go like, wow, I'm not actually the variable here. In fact, not only am I not the variable, I'm almost, and I say almost importantly, I'm almost the constant. Like, and thinking
Hmm.
about this as an engineer, like in Christianity, what I learned was and it's sort of a well-known fact that all of humanity has sinned and has fallen short of being good
Hmm.
people. There are no good people, so to speak. We all make mistakes. We all are in some way, shape, or form abusive. We've at best like lied once or twice and deceived someone. We've had not the best intentions or actions or motives or deeds, right? And so that's the baseline. And the baseline of like, look, stop trying to be good because you're bad. I think was super. I was like, wow, I feel accepted for my own nonsense. I feel seen and heard. Okay, but how then do I like get salvation? How then do I actually like become reconciled with God? How then do I become good, so to speak? And Christianity is like, yeah, the God um wants to forgive you, but it requires that you die because, according to all the Judeo Christian beliefs, and actually the Islamic belief as well, is that sin requires death to be forgiven. And this is why they have like animal sacrifice and stuff. You shed blood, it forgives sin.
Hmm. Yeah.
The Israeli festival, Yom Kippur, is exactly this. They like kill a goat and set another goat free, right? And so the Christian thesis is you're bad, and that's okay because God wants to forgive you. And how He does is you actually owe a debt of death, but Christ is like, look, I'm God rather is I'm going to enter the world I made as a person. His name is Jesus, and I'm going to live the Bible. I'm literally going to love my neighbor as myself. I'm going to give 10%. I'm going to do all the things, um, and then they'll kill me. And it's a perfect death. Jesus Christ has never, according to the Judeo-Christian teaching anyway, Jesus has never sinned, but he's this perfect goat, and
So
they
lamb,
kill him
right?
for it.
Just yeah.
Yeah, they kill him for it, and he says this is what Martin Luther called this the great exchange, right? Like his death in
Hmm.
my place, so I go free, and this is cool. So I don't need to like work to earn my forgiveness, my salvation. Just it's a free gift. And you said I love what you said. You said like, oh, this thing has consequences. You examine what you do. I don't examine what I do because oh maybe then I'll go to heaven. I don't pray 5 times a day because then I'll
Hmm.
earn my thing. I do it because like I'm like whoa man, so much has already been done for me for free. How can I like at least do something in return? So it's not so much I'm doing this to be saved, but because I already am, I'm like, let me just give as much as I can. Let me love people
Hmm.
freely. I don't have to earn anything. I'm already like he paid my bill, so now I can so that's sort of
Yeah.
that was very distinguishing for me across
Hmm.
Islam and all the other things I grew up around.
But how do you know it's true?
It's a good
Because
question.
this
Yeah.
is I guess what I suppose our viewers want to know, right? Just in this discussion about like a hyper rational people that we are believed to be, at least. I don't believe any of us are as rational as we think we are, like none of us. But we like to think, oh, like we are engineers, we're scientists, we're super Spock like rational. No, nobody's like that. You fool yourself saying that you're like that. And it's funny because everybody acknowledges that other people are not fully rational, but I am so rational, right? Just But like the problem is always other people. But I guess what people want to know, and it's exactly this. Like, you chose to believe this. How do you know this? Right?
We talked earlier about how, and
Yeah.
I maybe misused the word, like faith is this
Yeah.
anti-knowledge thing.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it feels, and so I don't know it. I can't know it. I
Hmm.
think the Bible, which again I used to teach, I still teach. 1 Corinthians 13, right? This chapter about like
Hmm.
the wedding chapter, is very clear. It said, "Look, for now we see in part, we know in part." Literally, this is like if you're a
Hmm.
Christian, this is the
Yeah.
word of God. God is like, bro, you just know in part. You don't actually know anything, um, and that is why you need faith to believe it.
Yeah.
But also, from teaching the Bible, Ephesians 1 and 2 will say that faith is not something that I like summon. It's a gift.
Hmm.
God
It's
gives me
yeah.
the faith to believe this. So like my faith is not even my own. It was given to me. And it works for me, man. Like if you look at my life, oh my God. Like if you look at my life, I think there's enough evidence that at least to me is convincing to like recursively have more faith.
Okay.
So I don't know. That's the answer. Right?
Yeah. And you're comfortable with that. What you're claiming is just this. I mean, there are parts of your life that you just don't know.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
And I don't think
but
we need to know, right? Because like there's this really awesome part of the Bible. Glauber, you've
mhm.
made me like full Bible teacher again.
Let's
Which
do it, man. It's just a,
there's this whole part of the Bible, right? Like the Last Supper, the painting,
mhm.
and you will see John, sort of like leaning on Jesus' chest like this. It's in all the museums. And at this scene, you have Peter talking to Jesus and going like, "Hey, so just quick question: what's going to happen to John in the future? Like, what's his deal? What's his destiny?" And it's such a random. It's like me asking you like, "Hey, what's going to happen to your teammate?" And Jesus looks at Peter and he's like, if John should remain alive forever until I come back a second time, what's it to you? Basically going like, dude, this is none of your business.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of stuff that's honestly none of my business because I believe, and part of the Christian belief is like, I was made, I was created. That's a thing. I'm not an accident. The fact that I wasn't an abortion is not an accident. And God created me to depend on Him and be in relationship with Him, to be His friend, to go like, I want to talk to you. I want to, and the other thing is this like weird power dynamic, right? Where at least in the Christian belief system, God is the creator of heaven, earth, everything, and he has
Hmm.
this like keen and unique tunnel vision interest in me and in you and in us like individually. So like he, at least in my mental model, is like, Tejas, how are you today? I want to know what's on your mind. You're talking to Glauber, like how's he doing? Is he feeling good? How are his kids? And it's
Tell
this
him,
like,
tell him I'm fine, although he doesn't need to ask. He just
yeah. And so he's like, it's so
yeah.
personal, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's really special. And so that's what I'm invited. That's what I was created for. And so, do I need to know this to be a fact? Absolutely not. What does help with the faith, as we've talked about with the experiments from Dr. Ali Crum and the milkshakes, is it does change physiology. It changes my insides, my blood, my hormones. It changes the way I perceive the world. It changes the way I engage with people like you and Dev at conferences. It like fundamentally shifts me towards being a human being that actually embodies this stuff. Like I'll actually love people just because they're people, just because they're image bearers of God, as the Bible would say. They bear the imago Dei,
Yeah.
right? And that's why I love you. I don't really care about anything else, man. You could be poor, you could be rich, you could be a whore, you could be a stripper, you could be my mom. I just love you equally. And I think this is something that people notice at conference. Like I go to tech conferences and there's a lot of people who are very shy and who this is not a criticism, but who will often say to me like, "Hey, I need alcohol before I can like engage with you." Um, I love them, and I don't care if they're Mark Zuckerberg or Mark Fuckerberg. I just like we're all equal here, and I want to know you. And then they say, "Oh, Tejas, you have such a great energy." Yeah, it's because I actually like value you extremely highly. I value you like just under God. I would give my life for you in a second, and I don't even need to know you. Why? Because like I'm following this one guy who did that for me. It's such a profound difference that I don't need to know everything about. The faith
Mhm.
itself affects the body. So
But do you see that, because the criticism that we often hear is like those people not only believe things without evidence, which I disagree with, by the way. But let's hear you answer part of that. Like that, some things you just have to believe.
Yeah.
uh, but sometimes it contradicts things that you do know from science. How do you see that?
This is such an you are so good at this, man.
I
Um,
wish, man. I wish.
you
If I
really
was so
are.
good at it, with my physiognomy, if I was so good at it, I would have a $12 million podcast on Spotify. You know,
So, that, let's manifest it,
let's
Joe.
manifest it.
And
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, the that was a really really good question. Which I can't remember. Could you repeat it?
So the thing is, like, the common criticism of religious people, which people had, and when I say people had, is
You.
like I used to say that, like, not me exclusively, but like, you guys just believe that, there's physical evidence of a bunch of stuff here about science, about how the world works, and then you come to me and you say that, this things works in a
Mm,
completely different way,
yeah.
and I have no evidence for that, but like, that's faith.
Yeah.
Is this how you see this? Or,
This is a great question. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of the question. So, I think of so many, and this is just the way my like pastor brain is wired.
yeah,
I often think about the Bible verse relevant to what you're saying.
yeah,
Um, there's a verse in the Bible that has served me very well over the course of
yeah.
my life, which is, I think it's in Proverbs, the great wisdom text, where
Mhm,
Solomon, the author, the debated author, says, "There is a way that seems right to a person, and this way leads to death." Um,
mhm,
and so why am I saying that? Well, I'll give you now another example from history. So I live in Berlin. There was a very famous pastor. I forget his name. German guy during the Nazi time. Dang it. Bonhoeffer, right? Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Pastor Bonhoeffer. He has a church and everything here in Berlin. I mean, had this was like a long time ago. So he was this like huge pacifist, right? He didn't believe in war, didn't believe in violence, just absolute pacifist.
mhm,
And he said constantly, he was talking about how in an ethical system, meaning to understand and practice ethics, one needs to take what they think they know about ethics and throw that out the window and rethink things. This is really like peak ethics is questioning your own ethics constantly.
mhm,
And I think this is super valuable because for me, it's again evidence based. You say, okay, but how can you know this if there's no evidence? Or another way, the world tells you to go in this direction, but your faith tells you to go in a completely different direction. How do you know your faith is true? I love science. I'm a huge fan of the scientific method, and for me, it's like, okay, give me a hypothesis and I'll test it. Um, and there are times where I've seen a pattern emerge in the world. For example, you need to have a lot of money and cars and hot girls at your side to be fulfilled. I think like the whole like sigma male thing is unfortunate. The Jordan Peterson type person, red pill stuff is very common, right? And Dan Bilzerian was a big part of this, and he's like got lawsuit after lawsuit. Anyway, so there's this like pattern of young men who think that you have to be, according to red pill philosophy, which I do not subscribe to, you need to be a high value male and you need to make a lot of money and have cars and get women, and then you're like cool, then you're like Brad Pitt, right? So that's the thesis from the world. Um, the Bible says something completely different. It's like, look, man, the meek will inherit the earth. Like when you're poor, like blessed are the poor, right, in spirit, for they belong to the kingdom of God or something. I don't know the full verse there. I have to look it
mhm.
up. But in any case, the world says this is virtuous and great. The Bible says that is virtuous and great. So to me, as a person of science, these are two hypotheses. Let me test them. So I've had the privilege of actually being wealthy, and maybe I never had like a Lamborghini, like the thank you JavaScript thing,
So
but like,
you never did PHP, just
yeah, unfortunately.
you never.
But I have had my fair share of privilege and
Yeah.
you could say women and all of this, um and I found it to be extremely empty. I was not fulfilled. I was not, and it's not just my experience. I actually live in a very hedonistic city. Berlin is famous for sex clubs and parties and all of this. And a friend of mine looks like the actor who played Tarzan in the Tarzan movie. Unbelievable physique, and he's beautiful. He's just the most beautiful person. It's not uncommon, unfortunately, for him to have a girl at his place and then she leaves and then he proceeds to open a, I'm not even making this up, open a bottle of whiskey, light a cigarette, and just sit alone and cry because he's so unfulfilled, right? And so
Mhm.
just testing the hypotheses, I go like, yeah, there's more evidence for what the Bible tells me than for what mass media tells me. So
Yeah. Now, there is a Catholic bishop that I like very much, and he has in fact, is quite famous because he has a YouTube channel and etc. So it's great because he got me exposed to a bunch of that. And one of the things he says that I love is that faith, at the end of the day, means trust, right? So you never have faith without evidence. That's not what anybody's asking you to do. In fact, you should not do it. I responded to somebody who responded to my original tweet that says, "Oh well, I used to believe this just because I was forced, and now I don't." They say, "Well, if that's you're probably better off today, in
Yeah.
in a sense." Okay, I obviously want this person. I don't even know who this person is. I know I've interacted with him in the past, but not a friend or anything like that. I obviously want him to see things the way I do, but in a journey kind of thing. Like, look, if you're coming from this, you're probably better off as where you are now.
Yeah.
So you don't discount evidence. You have to look for evidence, but there's only so much you can know. So I think in that sense, it's very similar to what you're saying, and it is impossible for you to know about me. If I tell you, Tejas, I'm sad today. Now I could be lying to you.
Yeah.
You don't know. I could be playing you. I could be trying to extract something from you, and then you think look, just I'm gonna make him believe I'm sad, and then I'm gonna do something, all of that could be true. You don't know. You have no way to verify. If you had a way to verify, you would, but you don't.
Yeah.
And then you take me at face value, not because you like to take people at face value, because you wouldn't take a random person in the street at face value on that, but because you know me. So through the relationship we have together, we came to know each other. And that relationship is what allows you. So all the evidence that you collected over unfortunately, but we'll fix that, not long time that we know each other. But you know the kind of person that I am. So when I tell you my internal state, when I tell you I'm sad, when I'm telling you I want to do something, you believe me. Now you don't extend that belief to everybody else, but you believe me. So I love the way this is put, which is look, yes, there are some things today that I believe that I have no evidence for, but I didn't choose to believe them. They are part of a puzzle. They're part of a mosaic, not intended, I guess. But
Beautiful.
and I know the other pieces. And the person who I believe that put the plan together is telling me through some means. It could be scripture, it could be this or that, or just or coincidence, or that this fits here. So I'll take the leap of faith. I trust you.
Yeah. Exactly. There's why did you say no pun intended when you said mosaic?
Well, because mosaic comes from Moses, right?
I didn't know that. You know what's another crazy coincidence here? I
Yeah.
actually attend a church called Mosaic Church in Berlin. Absolutely wild. But anyway, I agree with you. I think it's a piece of the puzzle that is adaptive. I think that's the word, right? It has to be adaptive. And unfortunately, for the vast majority of people listening to and experiencing this in one modality or another, whatever they've experienced with religion or church, that is, if they're atheists, and maybe you can speak to this as your experience, was not adaptive. It did not help you adapt into this environment that you were placed in by being born and living in. And I think it has to be adaptive. And so for me, I've recognized that, look, when I try things, when I test the hypotheses of the Bible, in the way I relate to people on at conferences, at life, it's adaptive, meaning I can adapt to my environment and bring my best self, but also bless them. For example, a lesson from the Bible, right? Don't extend grace. And grace is quite cool, because grace isn't you get what you deserve. It's you get what you don't deserve, which is so wild. It's you don't deserve forgiveness here, but fuck it. We have such a finite amount of time on this planet. I will forgive you, because you know what? Honestly, I care more about living at peace with you than bearing a grudge. So fuck it. I'll extend grace. This comes from the Bible. Turn the other cheek. Famous. It's because life's too short. So I test these hypotheses, and guess what? They help me adapt. They help me preserve friends, and not only friends, but people who respect me after. Hit me, I'll give you my other cheek. And they're like, okay, there's something here. You're going to stick with me no matter what. So I test the hypothesis. it helps me adapt. It helps me fit into this mosaic, as you mentioned. It helps me like fit into the puzzle, the context in which I was placed. Now, how does it work outside of the Bible? Well, you punch me, I'm going to punch you. We're going to kill each other, or maybe you'll kill me because I have hemophilia, and then you have a bunch of legal work to deal with. Like this is not going to go good, and so unfortunately, this doesn't help one adapt. In fact, it fucks up the life a lot more, right? So I think that's a key component, at least for me, is like I don't have the answers,
Yeah.
but I do know what helps me like adapt over time.
But I think it's important as well to not fall into the trap of saying then there's nothing we can know. And if I see things, I mean, it's this thing about like a growing amount of evidence. If there are things that don't match what it's written here, how do I deal with that? And one of the things that helped me, because I truly had this idea that like if you are religious, you've got to be stupid. It's just that's how I open it up. But
Yeah.
I truly thought like that. I would not always say that, which is a lot of people are replying saying, well, but everybody's always been nice to me and etc. But like, yeah, like you not always will say that. In some situations you will, but you think you just like you're making the judgment in your mind, which is worse for you, I guess. It's your loss, but as part of the. But I had this idea, and maybe it doesn't matter for anybody else. Maybe it was just a me thing. That this is a new discussion from the age of science, right? Now that we have science, we have this thing in opposition to this belief system about the world, in a sense, and you will be stupid to believe one versus the other. And one of the things that helped me through this process was we haven't talked too much about me. It's not the goal, but like my experience is completely different from yours, and it was a completely rational path of like looking at history and understanding like this thing happened, and then how do I deal with that? So no experiences, no mystical revelations, like no seeing patterns in my life. That none of that happened to me. And one of the things that helped me was I looked at Saint Augustine from the 4th century. Right? So this is a person from the 4th century, like not a modern person at all. And he would say, look, whenever there are many ways to interpret what Scripture is saying, right? So like any text, it says one thing. I mean, it could mean many things. It is your job to understand what that means, and whenever that seems to contradict what we learn from what he called the pagan sciences, what we would call today just sciences.
Yeah.
Did science evolve and change? Absolutely. But the idea that nobody was doing science was ridiculous. Of course, like there were people trying to understand the world.
Yeah.
And what Augustine would say, Saint Augustine, is like, look, if what you learn from the pagan sciences seems to contradict what you see in Scripture, rethink your interpretation of Scripture. Right, which doesn't mean like a Scripture is wrong. It means like you probably what you see in the universe is one of the things that allows you to put the puzzle together. Like there are 4 different potentialities for this, and then I get data from those other things, and based on what I see in the universe, I can exclude hypothesis 1, 2, and 3. But there's still hypothesis 4 and 5, and then one of those 2 must be true. Which a lot of people would criticize as like, oh, just like, this is a moving the goalpost and etc. Like you either believe or you don't, but it truly isn't. It's a process of like, hey, God created the universe. I do believe that. I didn't, but I do. And revealed himself in a way that ended up in Scripture. But he also wrote the natural law in the hearts of man, or it gave you the ability to go and look at the universe and see how does that work. So this has to be used in your process of understanding, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's if you're a Christian, that you believe that that's why he did it. Like like I
Yeah.
feel like I said earlier, I was created
Yeah.
to be in relationship with the Creator, to have this partnership, and so I think it's not just my belief. It's sort of Christian 101 is everything he does, everything God does. is to that end, is to
Mm-hmm.
like enrich this partnership between me and him, between us
Mm-hmm.
and him. So if he tells me, if there's science that he reveals that
Mm-hmm.
contradicts the word that he spoke, then he's just saying, look, I want this to make you pursue things. I want this to enrich our relationship. How might
Well,
it do that?
not contradicts what the words that he spoke, because it contradicts your interpretation of
Right.
the words that he spoke.
Right. And so then it's just, it becomes a skill issue on my side, and in
Yeah,
perceiving, right?
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You made a good point of your experience being completely different. I'd be happy to talk about differences if that's what you want. I
Well,
mean,
I tried to summarize it in that way, that for me this was a completely, totally rational endeavor. Like I had like I don't relate to the suffering experience and the talking to God, and I did have an episode in my past where I talked to God, and this when I stopped becoming a religious person or a Catholic or a Christian or everything altogether. This period was fuzzy because from there I was like, oh, I'm an atheist now, but I had a little bit of a new age phase in which like this transition phase until I settle. And
yeah.
um, I remember I was in a bus stop, and I
Hmm.
remember this very, very vividly. I was I think 14 or 15, something like that. So I was in a bus stop, and through what I learned in school about the terrible things that the Catholic Church did, which I do believe today are greatly exaggerated, not false. Nothing's perfect. None of us are perfect. The Catholic Church never claimed that. But just my teachers at school were also very anti-Catholic, for political reasons or whatever reason, but they were. And I was learning like science and etc. So in high school is when those things tend to happen. So looking at all of that, I I couldn't believe in God anymore.
Mm,
I said that's not what I see. That's not like this institution only exists to exploit people, right? Just
exactly.
they exploited a third of Europe for 1,000 years and etc. Which I don't believe anymore, by the way. But that's how I saw it back then. And science is what is true, and there's no God, right? I But then immediately I had a thought that will sound ridiculous, and I shouldn't say it because I will say it because I want to be an open book in this podcast. But I had this thought on my mind, which is, what if? I mean, and the thought just came to me,
Mm,
right? What if this is all a plot from the devil to push me away from the true path?
mm,
And when you think about it, if this were to be true, like if this were to be true, if there is a devil, uh, and he's playing his tricks on my mind or whatever, you would not be able to tell the difference. It's like the Occam razor kind of thing. You would not be able to tell the difference. And at least I wasn't. Like maybe with more like a. So I this thought came to me, and then I thought about it a little bit in the bus stop, waiting for the bus. So it all happened like waiting for the bus. And then at that moment, I said, God, please forgive me. I can't be with you anymore. I have to go after, I just don't believe in it. And if you are really true, and if you are really who you think you are, or one day, please bring me back. And I never thought about it again.
wow.
And in fact, I wouldn't be able to recall that story because like I just wasn't important. Like it was something I've never, much later, of course, I remember that this happened, and then I can put this in the story. But like after this thing, my life was essentially, except for this transitional period of like I went into like new age stuff. Uh, Everything for me was about rationality, what I can prove and what I can't prove, what I can discern and what I can't discern. So what changed my mind was really just looking at history with new eyes, with fresh eyes. Now, there were a couple of things that happened that led me to look into in the first place, and that's a much longer conversation. But looking at the historical context, at the historical data, learning more about history is done because I did not know. One thing, for example, I used to believe is that this is just a bunch of stuff written on a book,
Mm,
right? But everything we know about history is a bunch of stuff written on a book. and
exactly.
and about Alexander the Great, the earliest source that we have for Alexander the Great and the stuff that he's done is written 500 years after he lived,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So and there's, yeah, people distort stuff, and like those stories, they start to become more and more fantastical. This is all true, but like you had, essentially, it was not called the Bible, it was not a single book, but like all of those texts of the Bible, some of them were there 20 years after the fact, like with people who knew what was going on, and they didn't write a story. I mean, they were writing something that they wanted at least to have historical meaning. So I started, and one thing led to another, and then studied this a little bit more, and like I know a lot of Roman names that I did not know before. Like and you start looking, at some point, I remember I also had a transition period out of that, in which I said, this all seems true, but I'm not stupid, I'm intelligent. I can't acknowledge this.
Yeah.
But man, at some point the dam breaks, and you say, like, I can't ignore this anymore.
I can't argue. You're reminding me in sharing that for me also, there was
Mm-hmm.
this rational component to my
Mm-hmm.
discovery. I think the trauma, the pain, the suffering, all of that like overshadows. I went on
Yeah.
exactly the same journey you did, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And I entertained the hypothesis of like, what if this is just all a bunch of bullshit? What if a bunch of guys, the guys in the Last Supper, what if they all were just like, guys, let's get drunk and play a big prank on everyone. Let's just fucking
Yeah.
like make a let's look. I wouldn't be the first person to think, especially in a group of guys like frat boys, like let's start a fucking religion. um
Yeah.
and so I thought this too, and then same like you, I went down this historical pathway and I found out, oh wait, the 66 books in the non-Catholic Bible, we don't have Maccabees.
Yeah.
These 66 books are not, they're not books, they're just like letters that people wrote and gathered and assembled. To be fair, it was assembled by the Council of Nicaea, so by a group of men. And I have to believe there were good intentions in like curating this, but they were disparate texts. And I think one of the, like you said, at some point the dam breaks and you go like, holy shit, I can't not believe this.
Mm-hmm.
For me, one of those moments was finding the Gospel of Luke, right? Because this is the
Mm-hmm.
longest by volume of text, the longest book in the entire Bible. It makes up so much text. And it was written by, and again, this was like very soon after the ascension of Jesus Christ. This was written by written by Luke, who was a doctor, but it was commissioned by a Greek named Theophilus, which his name
Theophilus.
itself means lover of God, which is
Yeah.
kind of wild. And so he is a Greek. So he's not Jewish. He's not part of this whole Christian Jesus thing that's happening. He was one of the Jewish soldiers or security guards who was like, what the fuck? I'm just Greek here. And he said, hey, Luke, I need you to just do some investigative journalism, like go
Yeah.
interview people and find out and then write back to me. And so the book of Luke is like mandated by a non-Christian, and he found a doctor and he's like, I need you to just go do like Johnny Harris, like do a documentary, and then
Mm-hmm.
write this back to me. So he had no skin in the game. He was not even Jewish, he was not even, but he was like, I just want to understand that. How can a person shift culture so drastic? How can one man split the fucking calendar? How so if that happened, surely this guy must have raised the dead. Or was that a rumor? I don't know. Can you, Luke, can
Yeah.
you go? Right? And he did, and it's the most text in the Bible, in the New Testament. And then he writes back, and that's what that is. And I was like, holy shit, there's like no agenda here. So that was one of the moments. But then also, what, and I apologize if I'm going long here, but the other thing that sort of really established my belief was, sure, it may be a big prank, like let's all get drunk and start a religion, but at some point these guys had to pay for it, right? Like the way they
Oh
died
yeah.
was so fucking savage, bro. Like Peter, the guy who like walked with Jesus up to the cross, well, not up to the cross, but denied him a few days before, but he like spent most of his life like physically with Jesus Christ. um the Roman guard came to him and was like, listen, you need to renounce this shit, or we will kill you, we'll crucify you. In fact, we'll do it exactly the way we did it to Jesus. And he said to them, he was like, no, and this is all historical record, and again, we don't doubt fucking Alexander the Great, so why do we doubt this? I don't know.
Yeah.
But he said to them, no, I'm not worthy to be crucified like Christ. Crucify me, but upside down. Like he opted into more pain because he's like, look, I believe this, and if you're going to kill me, do it worse. So that was one thing. And then John, Jesus' quote unquote best friend, was, he had the worst, right? They were like, you need to stop saying this guy is God because Caesar is God and this is the Roman Empire. So like step in line, bitch. And he was like, I can't do that. I've seen him come back from death. Are you kidding me? And so they take him to the top of a big building and throw him off the roof. And he's like, he survived that, probably with some broken limbs. And they were like, oh my God, this man must be touched by God. We can't kill him. So then they said, let's try again. And they deep fried him, right? They put him in a vat of boiling oil. They boiled the guy alive. And he came out of that, like probably all twitching and crispy, and he was still alive. And they were like, oh my God, this guy is protected by God. And so they said, fine, we can't kill him. We will exile him to the Greek island of Patmos, where he will just live out the rest of his days in exile. And that's how he died, before he wrote or he died after he wrote the book of Revelation. So absolutely wild. So then, if this is all just a big prank, like let's just invent a
Yeah.
fucking religion for shits and giggles, would you be willing to not just be thrown off a building, but then be boiled alive? But and again, this is not in the Bible. Even this is just like history.
Yeah.
Like there's documents, as you mentioned, very close to the dates of these events that speak to this. So yeah, for me, I'm like, wow. Okay, I've never seen anyone in my life believe something to that extent where they'll be
Now,
willing to.
but do you see other explanations for all of that as reasonable or possible? Possible, I think it's a better word than reasonable.
What are some other explanations? Maybe we can explore that.
Yeah. So like, because and I can not to bury the lead. I can tell you my perspective first. A departure of what we've been doing so far, but like my perspective is that there are a lot of other explanations that are possible, right? They're possible. And as an atheist, sometimes just enunciating one of them is enough to disqualify that story, because you say, hey, look, I mean, the claim is that he was God and he raised from the dead, but here's an alternative explanation. Just the fact that I can enunciate that explanation is enough to disqualify, because here, for example, for the fact that there is documented evidence that people saw Jesus Christ alive after he was supposed to be dead, mass hallucination. That is the so as an atheist, I would accept that, because like you enunciated that, then yes, a mass hallucination would explain that. That's enough.
He also could have had twin.
He could have had a twin, or like there are many. There are many. The thing that does it for me is that like I think I stopped looking at the evidence, at the facts or alleged facts individually. So yes, point this out. There's an explanation for this. Point this out. There's another explanation for this. Point this out. There's an when you put them all together, like those other explanations, they start to become less and less and less and less believable.
Yeah.
Just as an example, like if they had mass hallucination, right? Just that's what they just made it up. The easy one. They just made this thing up. They would not be willing to die the way they did.
Exactly.
Right. So if you but many people today, like they get killed. They kill themselves for the most frivolous reasons. And if you really believe something, you have plenty of examples today of people are willing to blow themselves up for the things that they believe. Well, sure, but they were not the ones that came up with the lie, right? Just if you're the one coming up with the lie, you are in the situation, you want to get out of it. So when you put them all together, the other explanations feel less and less and less believable, right? The probability that any of the other the best explanation for the whole set of evidence, not each one individually, is this happened. So this is my journey in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, I think that's I agree entirely. Context matters, as they say, right? I think also there's something to be said for not to derail the discussion, but I think there's something to be said for the principles of certain faiths. And I look forward to future episodes with other faiths, but the principles, but also the methods by which we enact those principles. And this is where I think, unfortunately, Christianity and religious people fall short, because the methods, they're either so foreign from the modern cultural context that they're not applicable, or they're just outright bigoted and intolerant. And finding a method that is adaptive. I spoke about adaptivity earlier. Like that is literally just adaptive. It helps you move through the world in a way that blesses people around you and yourself. I think those methods are key. And I like to think that this is how I live my life as a person of faith. Like I don't, we can talk about conversion and like make the numbers game. Like how many people have you
Yeah,
converted? I don't fuck with that. But I
doesn't
think,
matter.
yeah. And I think, just, is it adaptive? And if not, like you said, if it's not adaptive, it just means you need to rethink your interpretation of God and the world around you. And that's such a great statement you made.
No, it
Yeah.
wasn't me. It was Saint
Mm,
Augustine in the fourth century, man. Just we're just learning from those guys. What was new to me is finding out that these things existed.
mm,
Because for me this was a new discussion. Like and I noticed that this thing about does God exist is something that people have been discussing forever.
yeah.
It's not something new. So at the very least, I have to go back and look at what they did, right? Just to not start from a blank slate and reinventing everything.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to find out that some of those reports were exaggerated, uh, would that affect your faith?
I already believe they were probably
Uh,
exaggerated.
yeah, that's okay. Yeah,
It's like, like,
and why doesn't it bug you?
because it doesn't matter. I think
Yeah.
at least to me, I've tested the hypotheses, right? I keep coming
Mhm.
back to this. Like, even if
Yeah.
they're exaggerated, at the end of the day, if you appreciate and love the gift, the God-given gift that is science, then you see a bunch of at least for me, when I look at everything Glauber, I just see a bunch of hypotheses. Okay, let's test it. Let's
Let's
test it.
test it.
Where am I going to be in a year if I continue to test this if I place a process in my life? For example, the Bible is very clear on repentance and forgiveness. Repentance meaning, this is another word that is misunderstood because of cultural religion, but repentance is not like going, I'm talking to a cat, like shit. Um,
You have to confess your sins, brother.
yeah, that's right. I was going
Look,
to say,
we're not here to settle this 500-year-old discussion. Like I
yeah,
just
but I think I think biblically,
yeah.
repentance, the original meaning of the word is to put a different foot forward, is to like turn your course, like literally walk in a different direction.
Hmm.
And so the biblical call is to repent and believe. And for me,
Hmm.
this is the hypothesis. Okay, so you're telling me if I turn from whatever lifestyle I'm pursuing and believe that God loves me, cares about me individually, has given his life for me, and I want, and so I'm basically, the save file exists, but now let me um adjust my lifestyle. That's a hypothesis. Let me test it and see where I land.
What do you think Catholics think repentance is?
So I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, I I I think culture. So I don't know the
Yeah.
Catholic thing, but I think culturally people think repentance, and I don't mean Catholic. I just
Oh
mean
yeah.
in general. People think repentance means you say the bad stuff you've done and then say, oh, I'm never going to do it again. I was a bad person. So you own your sin. Like, I was a bad person. I'm sorry for what I've done. Please, God, forgive me. Okay, I've repented. I can breathe a sigh of relief. And this, I think, is really more self-gratifying than God
Yeah.
gratifying, right? Because you're just
Yeah.
like, I said it's out of my system. I'm good. And
Yeah.
it's at the end of the day, at this point, you are God. God is not God. So that's sort of what I
No, repentance has to you have to transform yourself
correct.
and act differently. It's just which is, by the way, one of the discussions that people have about like Jesus, and he loved everybody and etc., which he did, right? But
Yeah.
he also told people very clearly, go and sin no more, right? So
Change your ways, walk in a
yeah,
new direction.
exactly. Just so
um
so it's not this is the problem. Sometimes the same problem you have with the word Christian, I
yeah,
have with the word tolerance. Because culturally, tolerance means this: everybody does or can mean this. I mean, everybody does whatever they want, everybody be whatever they want to be, and that's not what Jesus did. Jesus loved you, but then he also said, go and sin no more.
yeah,
So tolerance does not mean that like I will rubber stamp everything you do, and that I
exactly.
will believe that everything you do is great and fine and just be who you are. Because look, that's not. I will love you the best way I can, which is not an ounce of in comparison of how Jesus could,
Yeah,
right? But that there is this component as well of like you have to change.
yeah,
Just I have to tell you that you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, and there's a big trend in society to hate this, right? To like,
Hmm.
why should I change? I shouldn't change. I'm
Yeah.
fine the way I am. But also, don't you dare tell me how to live my life. And this is so a good friend of mine. His name is Dave Schnitter. He
Hmm.
awesome guy, right? He says this thing. He's a preacher, just full disclosure. And he said this thing once to his congregation. He was like, "Look, man, God says you can't be the same. To repent means to change your lifestyle." And a lot of people criticize Christianity. Oh, there's a lot of rules, and you have to follow rules. Don't have sex before you're married. Oh my God, there's rules. What do you,
Yeah.
and people particularly like that one. And my friend Dave says he's like, "Look, God doesn't give you a bunch of rules because he loves rules. He gives you a bunch of rules because he loves you." And
Hmm.
he makes it very clear that any father who loves their child will establish rules. So you have children. It's like if you have a fence around your house, and there's a street in front of it, you will establish the rule. Listen, no
Yeah.
playing outside the fence. And this is not because you hate your kid. This is because, look, if outside the fence you get hit by cars, I want to
You get the
protect you.
card.
That is the whole point of the rule based system. And that's again, I see those rules as a hypothesis, right? I test
Hmm.
it. Do not covet your neighbor's wife. Do not lie. Do not steal. I've done those things to test the counter
Oh, when I
hypothesis.
when I was a let me be a blasphemous person here, but in my atheist phase, like back then, so I'm just qualifying this. I had my own version of the Ten Commandments, and and one of them was this: like, do not covet thy neighbor's wife unless you're bigger than him.
Yeah. and
But
so and so I've
yeah.
I don't want to play in a street where I can get hit by a car. And fundamentally, this comes back to how you view God. Do you view him as
Hmm.
somebody who loves you and wants good for you, or do you view him as a taskmaster with a big ruler in his hand, going like, "I'm gonna beat the shit out of you if you don't do what I say," right? And unfortunately, and there's plenty of data to back this up, what I'm about to say. Unfortunately, our view of God, who identifies himself as a heavenly father, is heavily influenced by our view of our earthly father. And
Hmm.
a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of folks, unfortunately, grow up in homes where their dad's a piece of shit. He's a poor excuse of a man. And they project this onto God. And I think this is very sad because the truth is, God is the perfect father. Like, we all somehow, like, intrinsically know the ideal view of a father figure, right?
Hmm.
There with his kids, loves them, interested in them, would give his life for them. That is God. And I think if
Hmm.
we project that onto God, a lot of this stuff, including the rules, makes sense. Yeah. So there's a person in the chat, John
Yeah.
Ryan Edge, asking me to clean up my language. See, this is why, though. Like, Jesus Christ, being the
We, yeah.
iconoclast that he is, would, sort of fly in the face of rule. I think language, and the word shit is used in the Bible by Paul.
No.
By
By the way, are you seeing this on X?
No, I'm seeing it on Algora.
Oh
Um,
no, Gora. Yeah, I'm okay. Just but man, I have so many screen.
Yeah, yeah. And so, the Apostle Paul says the word shit. He says, "Therefore I count all the good things in this life as shit compared to the value in knowing Jesus." There's a place for such language. And the Bible is very clear to not have malice against people, to not curse
Yeah.
people, but to bless people. And sometimes this is very ironic, and this is one of those things where you can actually bless people using, like, bad words, because it
Hmm.
establishes, like, we're familiar here, we can do that. Of course, I wouldn't, like, use the word to curse anyone, like you or others, but I think it establishes, like, unfortunately, it's colloquial, in this day and age. It's like saying, I have, my friend JB has infinite riz, or like, bro is style maxing, like all these words. It's just colloquial. But anyway, um there's
Yeah.
also questions in the chat. I don't know if you want me
Yeah.
to
So
take them.
let's look, man. I think this has been fantastic. This is much better than I could have hoped for a
Same.
first episode. And there are a couple of people asking if they can ask questions. Let's do it. So the first one here. So Dev, our good friend Dev, is asking, why do you think? And Dev is really like, I think his pastime is probably finding wasp nests around in the street and go poke them, right? Because he has a stream here with a Catholic and a Protestant, and he's asking, why do you think there are so many denominations of Christianity? Why does everyone believe in their own interpretation and think all their interpretations are wrong? And I think we view this very differently.
Yeah. Yeah, he says, "Why do you think all?
Yeah,
Why do you think they think all other interpretations are wrong?" I'm
yeah,
happy to answer
exactly.
this,
Yeah,
and Glauber, I would love
yeah.
your thoughts on this as well. I think this is something again. I heavily accuse and condemn Western media for this. They make it seem like, and it's sensationalism. It's what sells the news, right? But they make it seem like Christians are hating each other, and like Protestants hate Catholics, hate Lutherans, and they think they're wrong. I don't think Catholics are wrong. I'll just go on record to
Mhm.
say that. And you give me shit for being Protestant, but I think it's all good faith. We just love
Yeah.
each other. But here's my take on this. In Christianity, and I think really in as we move through life, there's issues that we hold in a closed hand and in an
Mhm.
open hand. And the closed hand issues are just absolutely non-negotiable because without them, life doesn't make sense. There is no closed-handed issues outside of faith could be like um, JavaScript executes in a JavaScript virtual machine, right? V8 is a JavaScript engine. Like these stuff, like you can't debate with this shit. It's just a fact. In the context of faith, the Christian faith specifically, there are some closed-handed issues that if you don't agree to them, you just can't bear the name Christian. You can't be Catholic, you can't be Protestant, you can't be anything. And that is the idea that God is one God in three persons, so Father, Son, Spirit, and that God became a human being named Jesus Christ. He literally, the Creator entered creation, lived a perfect, sinless life, died in the place of you, me, and others to forgive us. And then rose from death 3 days later and ascended into heaven and is coming back soon. That's also a variant of what's called the Nicene Creed, established in 325 AD.
By the
This
Catholic Church.
yeah, yeah. And so those are closed-handed issues. There is
Yeah.
not a person in the world who can claim Christianity without with disagreeing with those. In fact, if you don't agree with those, you're not Christian. So closed-handed
No, but
issues.
by the way, I will disagree with that.
Okay.
Which is why I said Dev probably has this hobby of like poking wasps' nests, because
Yeah.
the reason we even have the Nicene Creed is that because people disagree with that. There were Christians. They call themselves Christians at least, and like there were all of those heresies in the first, second, and third century. In fact, one of the theological things that divide Catholics and Protestants is that Catholics changed the Nicene Creed by adding a Latin expression. Now, again, I'm not here to do theology. That's not my place. I'm not a specialist on any of that. What current modern Catholics will say is that like this doesn't really change the meaning of anything. It's just because in Greek things have this meaning, in Latin things have this other meaning, and then we added this just to clarify what was meant to begin with. All the way, it doesn't matter. Orthodox hate the fact that Catholics added this word to this creed that was immutable, but they did it exactly because the meaning that was understood without that was meaning that gave credence to a particular heresy called Arianism, right? And then before Arianism, you had Marcion and others, and the Gnostics in the second century, and so you had in the beginning of Christian history lots of Christians, self-professed Christians, which is the best you can hope for historically at least, that disagreed with a lot of that stuff. Therefore, you had to put the Nicene Creed together in the council to say this is the thing that we believe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
those
These are
heresies
the
are dead today, right?
Yeah, these are the closed-handed issues, and I think really, if we zoom out and or actually even zoom in, it's
Yeah,
really, really, really just heavily contingent on the person and work of one man named Jesus
yeah.
Christ. That it all depends on him and who we believe him to be. The same guy who somehow is just known by every human on earth, who is the best-selling book about, who has shifted the calendar, the most influential person in human history, right? So it all comes down to him. And Glauber, me, Jamon Holmgren, who's a Lutheran, also should probably be a guest on the podcast. The Primogen, right? We all hold this in the closed hand. There is no negotiating the person and work of Jesus Christ. Now, there is negotiating things like the sacraments, like the bread and wine, the Holy Communion, and baptism, and all of the stuff that does not matter nearly as much as the person and the work of Jesus Christ. And sure, we disagree with that. I don't necessarily think I'm qualified to say Glauber is
Sure.
wrong or the other thing is wrong, but we have different flavors, man. It's like you can choose PHP, Rails, or JavaScript. Ultimately, you're writing software, and so software is the closed hand, language is the open hand. Put it that way. So
I didn't mean to imply that I completely disagree with you. The thing that I was bringing to the discussion is that we have a point in time in which we said those are the things that we agree and those are non-negotiable. But like, should that have happened a little bit earlier or a little bit later in time? Those points would have been different. And
Yeah.
like, there were a lot of Christians in the beginning that did not accept the. And here's the thing, that is another misconception that a lot of people had, that like, how people just came up with like this myth got popularized by Dan Brown on the, what was the name of his book? I forgot. Like
The Da Vinci Code.
the Da Vinci Code. That up until the Council of Nicaea, people did not even believe that Jesus was God. I mean, like, some people did, some people didn't, and patently false. Everybody by that time believe, including the heretics, by the way, believed that Jesus was God. And I think this for me is because of that, because I look at history like all the way back. This is the non-negotiable part. Like, this man was somehow divine. But people disagreed a lot about what does that mean. Like, that can mean a lot of things. I mean, does that mean that the Trinity, for example, which is accepted today by everybody, Protestants, Orthodox, Christian, and Catholics, was not accepted by everybody. There are lots of people, including the Arian guy, for example, that believe that no, this is not a Trinity. There is that God comes first, and then he created Jesus as a created being that is still divine, but still a created being.
Yeah.
The thing for me is that those things, like, they truly don't matter. So I think that I think I agree with you in principle. I just don't agree that like the collection of things that puts us together is the Nicene Creed.
Yeah, no,
because
definitely.
that's a historical accident. So there is like you can push the envelope a little bit more.
The things that puts us together is that we agree on the identity of Jesus Christ. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
What's really interesting is like this even transcends like Mormonism and the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. Like, there's been times, and this is maybe something people don't know, but whenever Kent and I are at a conference, Kent Dodds, we will often, as often as we can anyway, find a time to pray together for the conference, for the people. Like, God bless them. Like, let them get something meaningful out of this. Let them level up their career. Let them, like, and this is not to say God is a vending machine. We can talk about the role of prayer if you want, but like, we do that because we love the people and we genuinely want them to flourish, right? And so do I disagree with Kent on a lot of things? Absolutely. We have different theologies, but there's this divinity, this infallibility of the person of Jesus Christ that Kent carries with him, and that's our common ground. So I think, Dev, to answer your question, it's it's a bunch of nonsense that everybody thinks the others are wrong. It's just media that is lying to you.
Another aspect that I find fantastic is that, like, I used to think, again, back then, that all this infighting is somehow proof or evidence that this is all false and fake anyway, and like nobody, just and they go to war because of what a stupid reason to go to war. But then in the 20th century, we've made this experiment of like removing religion from the equation in a lot of ways, and wars did not stop, disagreements did not stop, polarization did not stop. So as it turns out, got worse in some cases. So as it turns out, we humans are, for some reason, we really love fighting. And that's what we do. And religion is, once you come to believe those things to be true, they become very important to you. And I think, it is to be acknowledged that a lot of people will fight. I hope this will never happen in this podcast. And that's the bar I want to set. But absolutely, like, there were wars between Protestants and Catholics and etc. You've seen recently the show Shogun, on a fantastic show, by the way, in which it's all about this fighting. But my thesis about it today is that, again, we've done the experiment of taking religion out of the picture. Those things did not get better. In fact, in many cases, they got worse. So we just have to accept that some people will be able to sit down and have a civil disagreement on things, and some people will not. Look no further than the state of the United States, like I did today, right?
Yeah. We also, I think, if you truly believe in any beliefs, I think this is so. I was exposed to Islam and Buddhism and Hinduism and all of this. They all put virtue on showing honor to other people. Sure, Islam, there's extremist groups. For Christianity actually has been more fatal than all the terrorism of other religions combined. So there's always extremism, but they do count virtuosity, or virtuosity, not virtue, to showing honor to people. And if you don't have that, you don't have anything. Dev's asking a question about the role of prayer. Can I take that one?
You can take all of them and say, "You're my guest."
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
actually, I think I'm talking too much.
No, no.
It's all
About
about you.
prayer.
Yeah.
About prayer. For me, it's I used to think this way: God, give me what I want so I can be comfortable and continue to disobey you. um, Continue to give me fast internet access so I can use it for porn. And to and like whatever, I just, like, for me it was always like, give me help. I don't want to study for the exam. I just want to like get good grades, and it doesn't make any sense. um and also, on a more serious note, it's like, God, please give me this medicine that I need to continue living, right? It's always, please
Sure.
give me, please give me, please give me. What I've learned through study, similar to what you've done, Glauber, it sounds like, is examine the role of prayer. And you mentioned, Glauber, Augustine said this. If something is conflicting with, if something in the world conflicts with your view of God, then rethink your view of God, or vice versa. Rethink your view of the world. Um, that's how I've grown to see prayer, where it's not really asking for stuff, but it's more, I have an internal desire for things. I have an internal will. I want this to happen. I want to go there. I want to be on time. God, please let me speak at, I don't know, WWDC, whatever it may be. I want. But I'm a unique person, and God is a unique person. And God,
Mhm.
as my father, as we talked about, right? He talks about himself as the father. If he's my father and he wants good for me, then he also wants things. And so for me, the purpose of prayer is reconciling what I want to what he wants. And it's like, if you're watching on video, it's like this, now they're disparate. And when I pray, it's like they come into alignment. It's literally virtual dom diffing and reconciliation, if you speak front end.
I don't
And so,
front that, but
yeah, it's for Dev. He'll know what I mean. And so it's so for me, it's not necessarily, God, please do this for me. It's more, God, I want this. If you want this, awesome, let's get it. God, if I shouldn't want this, is my heart in the right place? Do I want the right thing? God, do I just want to be like famous and rich so that I can flex my greatness in front of people? Or do I want to be wealthy so I can bless people and give it away to the homeless, to the people who need it, so I can buy scholarship tickets? Like, where is my heart, and is it far from you or is it close to you? And then how can I bring it close to that ideal? And for me, the ideal is the person and work of Jesus. I mean,
yeah,
his track record is perfect. And so it's really, for me, a way to diff the state of my desires and heart with his, and then bring it closer. That's the purpose of prayer for me. So I almost never ask for things, but it's more like, God, I want this. And if you think it's going to be good for me, then let me have it. And if you think it's going to be bad for me, let's get rid of it. And this is something that recently I was very encouraged in with my brother-in-law, Philip. He's a soldier in the army, and he wants to go to this like elite training program. It's intense, and it's gonna like really mess him up in a good way. Um, and we were praying about this, like, should he go to it, should he not, because there might also be PTSD. It's very intense training. It's like the special
mhm.
forces people do it anyway. So um, we were praying about it, and he was praying with me, and he was like, God, I want this, and if you want me to have it, then let's do it. And if you don't want me to have it, then thanks for protecting me. The last thing I'll say is this: I read a book when I was young and foolish, younger, I guess, and foolish, about how to get girls. It was actually a great book, not necessarily for getting girls, but for like
Did it
forming high.
work?
It
Did it
did,
work?
um,
Did it
but
work?
but it was also not. It didn't work just for getting girls. It worked for like creating a great personality that now people like me. It was really great. It's called Models by Mark Manson, and it's unfortunately misrepresented, because it's like they make it seem like this like pickup artist, like the game type book, but it's actually really awesome, because the thesis of the book is um, just be really honest. Just be unabashedly yourself. That's it. Be as honest as you can be in the best way you know how. And then the world is big. There's billions of people. Many will reject you, but some will be like, I kind of like your genuineness. I want to be your friend. And some will stick around. And so, anyway, why am I bringing this up? Because that book, one of the final chapters, was talking about this idea of, what if this is a gift? And I think this is really cool, because like the author Mark Manson, also the author of The Subtle Art of How Not to Give a Fuck and Everything is Fucked. Like, he's a great artist, writer, and he mentions this idea of, when something bad happens to you, or when you don't get what you want, ask the question, what if this is a gift? what if this is actually like good for me? So my disease, right, where I die easily or I don't get healthcare, what if this is a gift? And it turns out, guess what, Glauber, like all these years later, this actually is a gift, because through the disease I learned how to code, I got a job in Germany, etc. We're sitting here because of my disease. Actually, if I
Yeah.
didn't have my disease, I'd probably have a worse life today. Similar to you, if you didn't go through your atheist phase, you'd probably not be saved, so to speak. And so what if it's a gift, I think is super key when navigating prayer and like reconciling my desires with God's.
Awesome. Explains why the React team is this is fuck off them. Just, just I hate JavaScript people. Let that be very directed. Awesome. With that joke, that I want to clarify, that was a joke. I guess we reached the end of today's episode, man. As I said, like a fantastic. I'm blessed to have you as my first guest. I mean, you insisted to be my first guest, and I'm
I did not
happy.
insist. I begged, but
I'm happy. Well, you didn't have to beg much. I mean, it was just such a pleasure to get to know you more. And next week, I am talking to Kent, so I'll try to explore some of those connections you made. Over time, I really hope that this podcast becomes bigger than just our niche,
Yeah.
and I really want to talk to people from other faiths, and I want to talk to people who are not developers as well, but are with the commonality that like people are in professions or environments where this is not the norm, right? Because I don't, just talking to a random person probably views the world very different than us. Atheism at that point is the challenging thing to do. That's what happened to me, right?
Yeah.
Look, man, thank you so much. I know it's late in Germany, and enjoy. Absolutely had a blast.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you. It
all
was a
next
blessing to
week.
me as well. Take care.